What's up, folks? Once again, welcome to my sketchy goodness with the amazing Keith Gratchow. How you doing, buddy?
As I mentioned before, I'm on deadline. Otherwise, I'm good. Right? It's like a good stress, I guess. It's, I keep on reminding myself this is not a serious situation. It's just, when you want to get something out the door for your client, and you're butting up against when it's supposed to be done by, it gets stressful. So
absolutely. Are you by chance, because there's certain stereotypes about artists, personality types, and deadlines and stress, are you one of the types of artists who tends to need the deadline to hey, get it done and then pour in the energy, or do you tend to try and space out your work?
I mean, you need to, here, let me start sharing. So just before we get into it, I'll share. It's going to be the same thing I was working on last time, but it's the flats, because this page had so much detail. I'll zoom out so you can see. It's not, is it?
Oh my God.
Yeah. So you can kind of see there's a lot going on here. And so I have to, get a good start on it. It's going to take me at least another hour or two probably to work on this. So
wow.
Yeah. So I can't say that I am there's some artists that are very regimented when it comes to their schedule. And they have to be because, especially when if you're working for a large company like Marvel, right?
Yeah.
And there's millions of dollars that are being spent towards the IP. You want to make sure you're not the thing that's causing everybody else to, get for your product to be late, right? And I have worked in that kind of environment before, and it's really stressful. You don't want to be the person that makes the mistake that doesn't get caught. And then all of a sudden it's like there's some art or something that isn't correct, right? So all throughout the process, you want to be able to. It's like a balance of getting something that is like a high caliber product, getting it done in a very high-paced manner, and doing it in a way where you're not taking it out on other people. That's hard. That's not an easy thing to do. Because if you're difficult to deal with your editor or the other people that you're working with because you're not getting back to them on time, or you're not communicating clearly so that people understand what you're talking about, so that takes more time, right? That can gum things up. If you are, you may be delightful to work with, but you're just slow as molasses, and you're not. I guess if you're not communicating, you can be really delightful to work with. But if you're not communicating, you're not realistic in regards to how long things take you to do.
Yes.
Something doesn't take you that long and then ends up taking much longer, and you don't communicate that with people. That's also not helpful. That's not good, right? And then if you're most of the time, if you're at that level, you're hopefully you're not taking shortcuts that are going to compromise the quality. But that's a little bit subjective, right? Because what you consider to be your best and could take you much longer to do because you're just being meticulous about it. Somebody else may look at it and go, I'm not seeing what you're seeing, or that to me isn't the thing that I would spend so much time on, right? So it's all of those things that you have to. So it's knowing how to get something that's high quality that you're sending out in a way that isn't going to make other people have to work that much harder, and also you're you know, able to communicate properly, like what it is that it's going to take you to the amount of time to do, right? So I've gotten pretty good to be able to figure out how long it's going to take me to do something when it comes to like a certain amount of pages, a certain amount of detail, a certain
Right
amount
on. Yeah.
of the type of process I'm going to be using. All of those things and I'm still working. I'm still working on it. Like it's not a perfect art. It's like, I'll give you a good example. So I was basing how long this was going to take me off of how long it took me to do saltwater this summer, and this is a bit more detailed.
Okay.
There's a bit more to it that I wasn't exactly. I kind of knew, but I wasn't sure if it was going to take me that much longer, which is like details of all the different uniforms and just
Oh,
some of
yeah.
the
Okay.
elements of the storytelling and all that stuff. So like it just took me a little bit longer than I was hoping it would take, but I'm within the range of where I said I would be, which would be mid-December. It just I was hoping it would be like maybe closer to early September or early December, and it's going to be more towards like the later part of the mid-December, right? So,
Yeah.
like there's that week and a half of um, with where me personally, I wish I had been able, and I could have, to be fair, or to be truthful, I wasn't like killing myself to push these out each day. I was
Mhm.
living, right? I was taking a day off here or there, right? Like saltwater, I literally took no days off for like
Ugh.
2 or 3 months, and I didn't want to do that again with Donnybrook. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have a little bit more of a reasonable um, expectation of my time. And so that's why it's probably that extra week where I was like, oh, well, I was hoping this bit would be done by like a week ago, but also I kind of took a little bit of time for myself. So and also the pages are a little bit more detailed than I thought they would be, like a little bit more time consuming in some ways than I thought they would be. So
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Exactly. Got to lay in all the
it's
details
not
so it all. Yeah. I mean, one thing I'm curious about, like, when it comes to judging how long it's going to take you to do something, I'm always very curious about, like I could probably give you, hey Keith, can you draw a panel with this specific model of car doing a donut? And I imagine you would go, cool, that one panel, and you want it doing a donut. Okay, cool. So I've given you exactly what it is, how it's moving. I imagine you could probably tell me within a fair chunk of accuracy, oh, it'll take me this long to draw that. But then when it comes to like full pages of comics where I am certain some of the direction you've been given is like for this particular panel that we're seeing where there's the sewer grate that's got steam coming out of it and people talking. I'm confident that the direction given is probably there's a sewer grate with steam and there are people talking. Not there's two people with one person leaning with a hand on the wall and the other person's gesturing and we see their back and all these specific little details. So when it comes to like conjuring up those details, is that even a thought for you, or are you just like stick some people in there and make them some
so
chat?
so yeah. Kind of back up a bit. Um, Dom's direction is clear, and it's not super detailed. Like he's not
Hmm.
like of the spectrum of writers I've worked with, he's somewhere in the middle. Like Mitch Cook, who I do saltwater with, he's
Yep.
very sparse. Like we've worked so long together that he can literally put like a couple of sentences down, and I totally get what's supposed to happen on that page. Sometimes even less. Like
Oh,
it's
wow.
just he gives me a lot of like space for the art, and he knows what he wants, and oftentimes like if there's some direct like if there's some specific stage direction for a page, he will tell me. But
Hmm.
oftentimes he's like gives me a lot of space to be creative. Um,
Oh yeah.
and then Dom is kind of like somewhere in the middle where it's like he's telling me because there's when it comes to like the hockey when they're actually playing hockey, he's very
Yep.
specific as to what's happening. So I
Interesting.
need to know like he tells me what things are like so there's different kinds of like maneuvers that I have to movements that the players are going to be going through. So like like that's a bit of work in that because I'm not familiar with hockey, so I've got to like look that up and make sure I've got the reference right and go through that. So that takes me a bit of extra time.
Right on.
But
Yeah.
when it comes to scenes like this scene, I think was like he wanted to that engine. He was like, I want that engine there. He wanted like some bikers, and then there's like the door that had to be there. Otherwise, I pretty much decided how many panels it was going to be, and
Oh wow. So it's like
you know,
super loose for you anyway.
yeah, it was pretty loose. Like it was
Cool.
just like there was a little bit of like like the biker is going to be interacting with one of the players. But I mean, the pacing of it was on me,
Mm.
so I could decide how many panels it would be and all that kind of stuff. Uh, and generally, I can do that regardless. But yeah, when it comes to like the amount of detail I put into this page, I probably sorry, I probably put in more. I because it was like, oh, okay, well, this is like a cool scene, and I don't want to like skimp on it. So like I know there was going to be motorbikes in there, so I had to somewhat accurately uh, draw them. And I've never really drawn. I can't say I've drawn too many motorbikes in my life, so these aren't
Mm.
accurate by any means, but they're accurate enough, I think, that they pass as motorcycles.
I mean, I see it, and yeah, I'm like, that's a motorbike.
Yeah, like they're for sure you can tell what they are, but like so there's that and the people, the bike, like so there's people standing around. So there's a lot of stuff in here that I for sure made. I didn't skimp at all with
Mm.
this page. And it's not that I like, and that's kind of where I was going back before when it comes to like some pages. The artist is going to put in so much detail because they just feel like the page it's a fun page to do, and they want to really they want to challenge themselves, right? They want to do that. And then there's sometimes when there's just not a lot of detail required, and there's no reason for the artist to like overly detail it, and some of them will do it anyway because that's just who they are. But
Yeah.
like I'm so that's where some artists may start to they can't help themselves. They have to put in every little nook and cranny and into the art, and then like the that could delay them. But
Mhm.
again, it's like it depends on obviously whether or not they've got like a good clear relationship with their team to be able to do stuff like that. But
Oh yeah.
anyway, um, your question essentially was like, how do I determine?
Yeah. Like, how do you know, or how do you decide on where to put stuff, especially when you're given so little stage direction, right? Like I was saying, like the people that are more north, east, northwest of where you're currently showing, they're like talk those two. Like I said, I doubt there's direction for these two specific people have to
Oh
be
yeah,
here. So like when you're building a scene out and a page out, like how do you decide that stuff, and how do you decide how long that will take, or is it just knee jerk reaction, just draw it in and it goes?
yeah. I think that's where part of the creativity comes into play. Again, you have to balance with if you're so some artists kind of trick themselves in regards to like how they their process how they lay out their process. Like every artist
Mm,
is going to do it differently. And it also depends on like whether or not they're just penciling, inking, or doing all of the above. like adding in what I'm doing here. Like if the artist is taking on a lot of the duties as I am, they may decide like they have to keep themselves engaged. And so when you're going through the beginning and reading a story and figuring out what everything looks like, you're taking like mental notes, or you may take real notes where you're like, oh, well, this page here is going to take me like a while because it's like so many characters I've got to draw. And I'm not really that into this page in particular because it's not that fun. It's just people talking, right? And so you may go, okay, well, I have to, how do I engage myself with that one if I know I'm not, if it's going to be something, right? So you may go, okay, well, if I were to draw, like if I throw in some of my friends in there and I draw like put in little Easter eggs and,
Yes.
so then all of a sudden a page where maybe some of it was just like going to be very generic, you're now putting in some like very specific kinds of people and just to make yourself like more engaged with what you're doing. But then, or you may go the flip side of it. You may go, I have there's like 20 something pages and I've got, let's say 18 of those pages are like super detailed, a lot of stage blocking. Like there's a lot going on with the pages that I have to make sure I get right. And that's going to be draining. And so I need a page where somewhere in the middle of those pages that are just like not going to challenge my brain. And so you may throw that page in the middle out of order because you can that you can get it in there. That's not going to like there's not like things you have to put in there that you require you to know what came before it or after it, maybe, right? So like you can play around with stuff like that. So some artists will like or some artists may take like where they're like they've got a certain character on certain pages that they go, I want to make sure I get this character right, and so they'll just like find all of those the pages with
hammer through,
draw the character to make sure they're consistent with it, because if they draw the character one day and then they don't draw the character for another 5 days, maybe they've forgotten like some of the like where things are. There's like all different tricks in regards to like some people work from like if the pages are, if there's more action at the end than in the beginning and they feel like they're going to be freshest when they first start, that they'll do those action pages first, right? Like there's a lot of things that and every artist is different in how they do it, or every project they may treat the project slightly differently from the one before in regards to their workflow. So it could be that like if the story is one where there's like a lot of just, I don't know, like people chatting, talking to each other, and you're like, oh, okay, I really got to keep myself engaged with this. Maybe I'll work from beginning to end with each page, just so I can finish it and feel like I've accomplished something.
Oh, right on.
Like 20 pages of the same kind of thing, pencils and then inks, and it's all kind of doing 20 pages of people talking on pencils can be like tiring, right?
Yeah. Oh my God.
So if you're like if you feel more engaged by like doing the whole page first, finishing it from beginning to end, and then you repeat the process, that may be something you do on a particular project that requires it, right? For me, like I do change things up all the time. Like recently I've been doing thumbnails, obviously, then I go into like, I'll pencil it, generally pencil it, depending on the project. The thumbnails may be close enough to the pencils. If the project is a lot more detailed, maybe I'll work on the pencils a bit more. And then after that, I go into, I do inks, and then I do like value and then color. This project only goes up to value. So, but like, and I don't necessarily think about what pages. I generally do them in order, but sometimes I don't. Like the last with saltwater, there was like a spread. I just couldn't do it. Like for whatever reason, I had to wait to the end to do the spread. It came out really good. I just couldn't figure out, like, there were things about it that I had to work out first. So
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'll skip it for now because I'm not sure exactly what I want to do. And then hopefully by the time I'm ready for it, I'll figure it out. And that's pretty much what happened. So,
Nice.
this, I think I just worked in order just because, like, um, yeah, this one was like, there's a there's a lot happening, and it was designed in a way where, like, almost like every 3 or 4 pages, it's like a new character.
Mm.
So it's almost like this was almost like like 2 or 3 comics within one, because there's
Oh, yeah.
different uh, this, like, what I'm working on right now is a completely different setting, right,
Hmm.
than what I've worked on before. So it's it's one of those things where like it kept me engaged almost all the way throughout the
Oh,
book,
right on. Yeah.
which is, like, not every issue of Donnybrook has been like it. It just, this particular issue is like, there's a lot happening, so it's like, well, there's a lot I have to keep focused on, which is really, it's good. I mean, it's just, but I've got to, like, make sure, like, all the uniforms. There's, like, so many different uniforms that are constantly changing, and they're going from, like, home to away, and they change uniforms,
Oh,
right? And the
it's,
different,
yeah, you're going from keeping yourself entertained to, okay, am I getting all these right details?
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Also, really quick, um, Bleecker Street Comics has commented. That's a smaller comic book shop located in Niagara. Evening, you filthy animals, and Merry Christmas. And then
Merry
he added on,
Christmas.
yeah, Merry Christmas. And he added on great looking page. And then
Thank
over
you.
on Instagram, Kevin Manklow, wonderful Toronto indie comics artist, among many other talents, joined on our Instagram stream and said, "Look at those beards." Um, and then he's got some questions for me. Oh, actually, literally just added one. Cool. All right, four questions. 3 questions. We'll see how it goes. So, first one, Keith. Do you
Yeah.
work towards a hero panel on each page?
Do I work towards a hero panel?
Yeah, so I guess like on each page, do you have like a the main panel, the pinch point, if you would, um, or with the story defined panel dimensions? Oh, interesting. Okay.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Like, every page should have certain kinds of panels in it. Like, you should have an establishing shot, an action shot, and a, like, close up / emotional shot.
Mm,
So those are the types of shots. And generally, yeah, like this page here. So you've got your establishing on top. There's a lot of establishing. I'd say the only real actiony shot is, like, with the biker putting his leg out, and then the bottom one here where you have, it's a little bit of a combination action / emotional shot where the biker's
mm.
like, hey, this one isn't super action packed, but that's kind of, like, there's not always pure action, emotion, and establishing. Sometimes it's like variations on all three,
Yeah.
but I do try to make sure I have that. I try to make sure I have, like, a variation in regards to, so I've got a down establishing shot here where we're getting a really good sense of, like, the setting of the, where they are, who the characters are going to be throughout this. It's like, I think it's like at least it's a 3 point perspective, and then a little bit of a, not really too much of a fisheye or anything like that, or warp or anything. It's pretty direct. And then this one again is a little bit. The second one here is it's still like a bird's eye bit, but it's a closer in. And then this third one here is like a kind of more of an emotional shot, like a worm's eye emotional shot. And then these three, the three below, are kind of I would say actiony, and the last one being actiony emotion, right? So
Mhm.
like, not every page is going to behave like that. It's really whatever is dictated for this, like the pacing of the story, right?
Oh,
Whatever the
right on.
story, you don't put it in there just to put it in there, but like, I mean, I try to make it so that whatever I'm doing, first of all, engages me. So I have to make it
Yeah,
so that
key.
I'm interested in whatever I'm drawing. I don't want to draw the same kinds of panels over and over. Um, and then I also, has to, it's a balance between that and the story. So like, you don't want to, the artist has to balance what's going to make them have a nice time drawing, but also make sure that they're telling the best story possible, which is an ode to the writer. And then,
Mhm.
like there's always, um, like, so that means that like you may do certain things that you're like, okay, like I've got a, like this second panel here, it's not a super exciting shot, right? But like I had to figure out, like, okay, how do I establish what's going on with these characters to get them to the last panel? And so I figured putting that panel in there helps me to do that. And it was exciting enough in that the characters are doing different things, and it's there's enough things happening. There's birds flying around and all that stuff. So I made it interesting enough for myself. Um, but there's also like, thinking about like the amount of detail you put into something. I'm trying to think. Unfortunately, these have a lot of detail. Like, okay,
Yeah, these are
I mean,
some crunchy panels.
this last page, this last panel here, I didn't put a background in there, right? Like, there's no necessities. There's going to be word balloons. I could have put a little bit of detail if I wanted to, but like that's where I was talking before about some artists would put detail in every single panel
Mm.
because they can, because they know that. But it's not all about every panel being artsy. It's just it's telling the story. So like I'm essentially deciding that, um, like in that last panel, it saves me a little bit of time, but it's also a situation where it's not necessary for me to um, it's not necessary for me to like put in all that detail, right? So
Yeah.
it's a balance. It's learning, it's experience, learning through trial and error, failure, what works, what doesn't work. Trying to make sure you're doing the best job you can. Make sure you're making sure that you're being fair to the writer who created this story, and you want to really, put as much of effort as you can into something that they put so much effort into, and then also keep yourself engaged, but also not, make sure you're staying on schedule, but then also, right, not, like overdoing it because there's no necessity to like put every stinking little detail into a page, because the person looking at it needs time to rest, right? So there's
Yeah.
all these things that go into it that you just have to think about, and that's just through experience. I hope I answered Kevin's question. I think that's what he was asking me. I'm not sure I exactly understood what he was asking, but that's how I interpreted what he was asking.
I think you did. It makes sense to me. His other question I find interesting. Um, he asks, how would you approach panel weight and emphasis for a webtoon versus a regular print comic?
How would I put what? How do I
How would you
emphasize
approach panel weight and emphasis for a webtoon versus a regular print comic?
panel weight? Does he mean like the actual like thickness of the panels, like, or is he talking about like, is it like these
That's
things
a
here,
good.
the black lines here that are, is that panel weight? Is that what he's talking about, or is he talking about like the weight in regards to like the how dense it is,
Mhm.
in regards to like the story.
I'm not sure. Kevin, if you're in the chat there on Instagram, let us know what you meant by uh, panel weight and emphasis for that question. I'm leaning towards how and when to choose which panel to most emphasize and give the most weight to on the page.
So with like a web comic, you're dealing with a completely different animal. Like a web
Oh yeah.
comic, I mean, generally speaking, like a comic book is going to be like the vertical is going to be longer than the horizontal, but with a web comic, it's like the reverse. It's going to the web's usually wider than right. It can be. I mean, there's also you can really do whatever you want depending on like what the format of it is. There's the 3-panel web comics. There's the scrolling down web comic.
Mm-hmm.
There's a single page web comic. Like there's there's really no limit. I think in that way, like you have much more versatility. It's how people read.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
With print versus digital you can have like anywhere from what I described. You can add 3D elements into it, like actual like elements where things are moving, right? You can't do that with a printed page, right? Printed page is dependent on your interaction with turning a page, how quickly like you're basically looking at the relationship you have with the creative team, like the story that's being created,
Mm-hmm.
and the page is a little bit more. If you decide that you're going to look at something longer, but it's limited to that size. Whereas
Yeah.
with a digital, you can zoom into something. There can be music playing that tells you how quickly to go. You can it's a different kind of animal in regards to like how you're pacing and how you're taking that story in. Like that's how you create weight, right? Like that's how you create like emphasis on certain things. Is you're going to if it's a digital comic that is motion comic, then you're in a sense you're almost creating something that's animated in some ways.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's a closer animal to like a movie or something animated when it's a web comic potentially, whereas a printed comic it's a pretty static thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like like if you were to take like old film from a movie and look at each particular frame, it's a similar thing. You're just looking at like this flat thing, right? Before it speeds up to make it look like it's moving, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
that's how I interpret what he's asking. And then if he's asking about like the actual like thickness of the line, it doesn't matter. Like it's whatever you want to make it.
Yeah. He has provided some clarification, which Kevin, thank you. So what he states is, so I'll read the main question and then add the clarification. So original question was, how would you approach panel weight and emphasis for a webtoon versus regular print comic? And then he emphasized with like how your guy with the long hair and goatee in the side profile is a larger scale versus the panels behind him. Because that character in the foreground is in front of the panel behind him, there's an emphasis on what he's doing. How does that work on a web comic? Oh, okay. So like, yeah, how you're playing with the comics, the fact that this character, this biker dude, is physically so large he's busting out of his own panel, but he's also in front of the panel behind him. So that is, especially like a print comic, as my eye goes down the page, I would see the fact that he's breaking the border itself. And that would be like, oh, attend to him. Why is he doing this? I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, how would you try and do that in a web comic, or would you if you were going to do it in the web?
Again, this is just it's going back to like, are you going to like a webtoon which has specific templates? I couldn't.
Oh, does it? Oh.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you how to do that with a webtoon because I'm not familiar with their template system. it may make it really hard to do it. But hypothetically, I guess if you were to, if it was like limited to like a certain like physical space that you like a pixel space within dimensionally, you can do the same thing. It wouldn't be any different. You're just using you're just rearranging it how you want it. So like technically right now this is digital, right?
I mean, quite literally, it is. Yeah,
it's not printed. So hypothetically, if a webcomic was allowed for this size, then that would be your answer, right? It just depends. It depends on whatever the format is of whatever program, whatever. If you're going to like Webtoons, which I think is specific, I haven't been there in a long time. So if they're very specific to like the dimensions, then you have to follow their dimensions, and you may not be able to do what I'm doing here in the same way because it doesn't allow you to do it. You have to work within this. You know, like if it's a scrolling down thing, then you wouldn't necessarily want to. You wouldn't necessarily. Maybe you would want to have like different sizing if it's scrolling down. Like you may want to, if it's going this way, you may want more horizontal versus vertical. Versus if it's going down, if people are going to scroll down, you would maybe want it more vertically narrow. Horizontally narrow and vertically longer. Like
so it's elongated.
You have to know whatever program you're using, what the limitations are, what they want, and then you can be creative once you know what those parameters are. And then so I can't really answer that specific question without knowing where you're planning on taking the actual art. And also, if you decide to like if you plan on submitting to something, and this goes for any, whether it's a web comic or a publisher that is a publisher that actually has print comics, you have to know what they're looking for before you, like if you're specifically planning on submitting to like Marvel, don't submit web comics like that look like web comics. Like you submit to like what they're looking for, what using their characters and like, or if you're going with a publisher that has like all different IPs, find out what kind of IPs they have, and then don't do those IPs because like they don't necessarily need the same thing. Like if you're like, my story is like hockey players on this team, that's trying to get into the playoffs, and they already have one of their major comics exactly the same. Why would you submit? Why would they want your
exactly? They've already got it.
So you have to, again, that wasn't exactly what you're asking before, but I'm just giving you a bit of experience that I've had when I submitted to publishers in the past, where they're like, well, we already have this kind of comic, so we have no interest in yours. And you're like, you didn't even look at it, but I get it. Like they already have a space comic, and they're not looking for another space comic, right? So,
yeah. Kevin adds, it looks great, by the way. And then thanks for translating. Happy to translate for you, Kevin. Do my best. I do find it interesting though, because the way that you've emphasized that particular character, Keith, where it's popped out, and it is very much so vertical friendly, if you will. It reminds me of say Mad Quill's original, I believe it was on Webtoons. Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. Their original comic that they had for I want to say it's Bestiary, but it's not. It's Feral, which I have a beautiful poster of. So for Feral, it was a webcomic, and it was just basically a very, very singular long page. And I think one of the things that stood out for me is there was a scene where they needed to basically lay down some info, right? So good old exposition, not always our favorite thing, but sometimes context matters and you got to give it. So they had some panels with some characters doing interactions and all sorts of stuff, talking or fighting. And then as you scroll down the page, they had not word bubbles, but sort of rectangular panels of describing text and of what was going on, and then sort of smoke. A very thin line of smoke appeared, and as you scroll down more, it gets thicker, and it leads sort of windingly down the page until you hit a gentleman at a campfire. And I found that very interesting because that line of smoke was in the foreground of everything else, and yet it was subtle enough to not take away from it all. So yeah, it's very interesting. Like Kevin's got some really fun experience when it comes to having done web comics and non-print comics, and then also having done the bestiary, very much so the print comics as well. Yeah, it's sort of, my brain got clicking away when he asked the question. I was like, that's interesting. Have you?
Sorry, I was going to say DC has experimented in the past with web comics that turn into print comics. And so what ends up happening is they have to print at a very specific size, or there's a very specific amount of like proportion of the web comic. First of all, you have to know that you're going to be working in a high resolution, right? Because the web comic doesn't, I mean, it can, but at one point, you know, you can only upload a certain amount of like size, right? So if you usually artists would work at a higher resolution, but that may not always be the case. So you have to make sure that that's with the knowing that you may print it, but also they weren't proportionally, they weren't normal comic book size, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think if you notice, there's some, like when you look at like collections from like some of the old comic strips, the way that they'll print like Calvin and Hobbes and stuff, there's a lot of white space above and below. It's because, you know, I mean, there are sometimes they'll actually go horizontal with it, and there's still space, but like, you know, a lot of it's a matter of like what's going to sell on the shelf, and if it's like a weird space on the shelf, it may mess up the amount of space they have for other things, right? So a lot of publishers are not just going to want these really weird, wonky sized comic strips because of you know, it takes up too much room on their shelf, and so, you know, you have to kind of go ahead and make a decision. You're going to make something that's closer in comic size, or if it's a weird size, you may have to have something that has a lot of white space, right? So there's all those interesting factors that come about when you're doing something that wasn't technically meant for print.
Yeah, that like gap in translation, I always find very interesting. Like I would love to see. I think I like the idea of more webtoons being into print, but I definitely think because of their very nature, it can sometimes make it very difficult. And I'm sure a lot of fans out there would agree. They would love their favorite web comics to be printed in graphic or turned into graphic novels and all that cool stuff. But yeah, it's like it wasn't meant to do that. So yeah. And Kevin adds, "Yep, webtoons can be an acute feeling in the rump at times." Interesting. This is also something I don't think I've ever really run across. I know a number of people who have worked in webtoons and done their platform, but I've never really talked about the function of it.
Yeah. I mean, there's also been, like, I think, is it Erin Faith Hicks who's done like some really interesting experiments when it comes to using web comics. I think that's who that I'm thinking of. That I remember reading like this. So it was a scroll down years ago. It was a scroll down. It was essentially like she was telling. I think it was like Little Red Robin Hood Little Red Robin Hood or something like that, where you were scrolling down, and so everything was long. But I think I don't know if she actually printed it out or if it was just a digital only, but it was interesting. This is like when, and this may have been like 10 or 15 years ago when I saw this, but it was like when people were just starting to really experiment with how they can use like web comics the functionality of websites were allowing for really different things.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
about 10 or 15 years ago. Whereas today it's kind of, like there's so much things you can do because you have so much, for the most part, the limitations are much freer.
Hmm.
But either way, yeah, like, and so I can't remember if she ever printed it or not. I think it was Faith Erin Hicks. I could be wrong, but um, it was somebody who's in that arena of indie, like people that have worked for Boom and Top
Yeah.
Shelf and second um, second hand, yeah, first second, sorry, first second, that like uh, have have experimented with the medium.
Interesting. I mean, I always love and encourage that. I've gone to Faith Erin Hicks' website, faitherinhicks.com, ERIN, for anyone out there who's going to go and visit the website. I'm not seeing Little Red Riding Hood, but I'm not saying also their website's exhaustive. Um, but yeah, that sounds really interesting. Like always love the idea of taking the medium of comics, which I feel is an extremely powerful storytelling medium, and then using the technology we have available to like really tweak it, pull it, push it, see what you can do with it. So that's super cool.
You have to, so there's a bit of an indulgence, right? Because you have to be able to. There's uh, the comics are by nature, they're very economic with their space,
Oh,
right? Like there was a, if you notice, and I don't know exactly when it shifted, but there used to be a time, if you look at the way that comics, the old 80s, like anything from the 80s, maybe even early 90s in the past, they would have a much more space in the top, uh, like
yes.
right, like there'd be a lot of white space on the side here, right? And so at
And
some
yeah, it
point,
used to be like a full inch column, if not more.
yeah, and then and they also had to make sure though that the font size was essentially the same, right? So you can read it. But then at some point in the 90s, I think they were able to go to full bleed because the technology changed, allowed them to do that. And so all of a sudden that all that space was like, why are we wasting it with white? We can actually like fill it in with art, right?
Hmm.
And so then um, you know nowadays you can have full bleed pages from page 1 to page 30 if you wanted to.
Oh yeah.
But my point, going back to the economy of space and indulgence, is that you can experiment with something, making something like oversized or an odd shape, or as I said, have everything bleed in a certain way, and that's an indulgence. But you have to hope by doing that, you're spending a lot of time and money in the hope that somebody will buy it, and that
Yeah.
a place will. If you're other than indie, if you're like a publisher, working with a publisher, or you're big enough that you can put your books in stores. Those stores have very limited space, and
Oh,
they if your book isn't going to sell, if it's a weird shape and size, like if it's something that's going to be difficult to put around other things, they may not give it a chance, and or if they try it, they may not give it a long chance, right?
yes, and on that too, like it's something I had never thought about. But I was listening to Brandon Sanderson's lecture series that he did for 2025 or 2024, and one of the things that came up was the length of his books. Um, like specifically, if you have your books in stores and say like at chapters for our Canadian listeners and folks out there, where if you make a graphic novel, for instance, and it's going to sit on the shelf spine out, not face forward, but spine, um, the bookstores, when they're deciding what to and what not to purchase, they literally will look at how thick is the book, how much space does a singular unit take up on the shelf, how much do we sell the unit for, how much space or how much money per inch in this printed book is it, versus another copy. Because I guess in Brandon Sanderson's case, because his books can be quite huge, he was getting some pressure from the stores to be like, hey, we need to either make your books shorter or sell them for more money because of the literal physical space they're taking.
Yep.
Now with comics and graphic novels, obviously, like you get a lot of leeway. Like you've got a graphic novel. This is especially as DC and Marvel goes, like this is a bigger one. This happens to be Cover of Darkness from Source Point Press. But like that's not a lot of space, and that's a fair sized graphic novel. I know like there's
Something
obviously
like this,
right, like a much bigger book.
right? Like you've got, and then all the I think the essentials worked really well because they were so cheap to print, right?
Oh yeah,
but they were pretty thick too. But yeah, it's like comic shops are a little bit more forgiving. They do have an area for indie creators often, but bookstores have people that generally will buy. They're the ones that like buy books for the store. I know a friend of mine who did that, and he would get poo-pooed on putting more comic book oriented stuff. It's whatever's going to sell, not what they're conservative. They're just very conservative about the whole situation, right?
oh exactly.
So yeah, I mean that's just part of the thing you have to think about. It's the art versus the so it's the indulgence versus the commercial ability of something to make money for whoever's selling it, right?
Oh, big time. It's such an interesting thing too, where like one thing that it makes me think of is I've seen a number of comics that are what I would say is physically, the printed book is physically short, 6 to 8 inches, but then they're like 12 inches long. And when my brain sees that thing's, spine out, it's going to like stick out weirdly from the bookshelf and it'll be weird. But I've seen people who take those, well, not people, I've seen the final product where a book like that is actually put in a slip case that can then be stood up and take up no more space than a regular book.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff behind the marketing there. I think that's really cool. That could be a whole very in-depth episode with a really cool conversation. I did want to mention earlier when Leah Gracho mentioned in the comments regarding panel inline emphasis and stuff like that in a static or analog image comic. The use of the space on the page becomes part of the illustration. Note that on this page, the one Keith's working on, how the white space outside the panels are arranged as an upside-down triangle, drawing the eye towards a single larger panel at the bottom. 100%.
Yeah. He's looking at that's a whole other conversation is composition and how to get your eye to go from one thing to another, and there's a whole huge art to comic book composition, and then there's outside of that there's just like paintings with how they a single image illustration type situation where your eye is supposed to go around on a canvas, I guess, right? So there's all different ways to you have to all the different things you have to think about when you're designing a page. That's why, I keep on tell people like to really put a lot of time and effort into their thumbnails, because that's where you can see very quickly whether something's working or not working, and then you can change it if it isn't, right? And that's that way you don't get to hopefully you won't get to the finished page go, oh geez, this is not working at all, what was I thinking, right?
Oh my god,
and just kind of going back to thanks, Dad. Just going back to like a point I was making earlier in regards to the order I do something in. I've learned recently that, or not recent, but just something that I've been doing more recently with the order and the process I do something. I'm giving myself a little bit more time because I when I'm drawing something, like let's say I draw a character for, a bunch of pages, or maybe a better, like there's so many details in these like uniforms that I'm
Oh,
drawing
right on.
that
Yeah.
by the time I start by the time I end, they kind of warp a little bit. So like the gloves get a
Oh.
little bit bigger, And so if I do that, I go from page 1 to page 20 something in pencils. By the time I get back to the inks, my eyes are fresh and I can actually see where I'm like, oh man, I was drawing those gloves really small with the pencils, and there they got much bigger towards the end, but I like them bigger. So I'm going to go back and adjust that in the pencils. So like it gives you more time to actually like see some of your mistakes if you
Mm.
versus doing something where like you start with pencils on page 1 and then finish the page. And so
Yeah.
and again, I've done it that way too, and if it works for people, great. But for me, I notice, with me at least, especially when it comes to like sometimes people like the way their faces are, or you by the time you get to the finish and you've kind of really drawn that character in all different poses,
Yeah.
you realize that like maybe you drew the nose a little bit oddly in the beginning and it became a little bit more fully fleshed out towards the end. So you want to go
Huh.
back to the beginning and adjust that nose, right? And that way it gives you more time if you're doing it in that way. And then you go into the inks and you can make sure in the pencils when you're inking it, you can erase the pencils, adjust the nose to the one that you like towards the end, right? But now it's given you more time to make those changes, right?
Yeah. Huh. I've never really considered that, but like, yeah, as you're drawing and redrawing this character or any specific character, even background characters, yeah, like you really have to keep a keen eye on proportion. Which, like, to say it out loud, duh. But yeah, like, especially if it's not something you're keenly familiar with, like the size of a hockey glove, exactly how big is it, or the relative size or length of someone's hockey stick. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, Kevin commented over on Instagram regarding book size. 17 artist editions, but they take up so much space. Hard to hide.
Mhm.
Hard to hide them from my wife when I buy them.
Yeah, they're great because you get to see how, and the ones that have the actual like original art where you can see
Mm,
like where all the mistakes are and stuff. Uh, that's just invaluable. As an artist, you can actually like really see the process and how the artist was thinking, and when it came to like um, the composition of the page and their anatomy and perspective and all that kind of stuff, right? So if you're wanting to like really learn without having the artist explain it to you, it's a really great way for you to get a sense of their process.
yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the few of them that I've seen, just as like a reader, I love them. I like to see those kind of details where they strip out the color, they strip out basically down to the drawing. And it's just kind of mystifying to get to see it. I'm sure as an artist, someone who actually like regularly is drawing and working on something, you are probably getting so much more out of it than I am. But I do find them fantastic. And Keith, on that note, we are 43 for whatever seconds away from our hour. There's my phone telling me to write. Um, Firstly, for those out there, if you have an artist in your life or someone who likes comics, artist editions, solid idea for Christmas gifts.
Yeah,
Feel
go to the
free. I'm
comic
sure they
shop.
will. Yeah, they'll love them. Go to your local comic shops, ask about them. I'm sure they'll have quite a few. Um, and yeah, Keith, this is our last episode of 2025.
Mhm.
It has been a heck of a year. I believe we have done, I didn't actually check, but I'm going to say something like 15 or 16 episodes, if not more. And I've had a blast at it, and I can't
Yeah,
wait
me
more for
too.
next year.
Yeah, we always. I just you would think that like you would run out of things to talk about, but there's always more to talk about. So
Yeah.
that's why we can keep on doing these, right?
and I do look forward to it. And to the folks out there at YouTube land or over live on Instagram, thank you for tuning in this year. We will absolutely see you next year. Comment down below what you think of this particular panel, what you think of the show. Leave some questions for Keith or myself later on. We will get to them, I promise. I get notifications when we get comments. And otherwise, yeah, subscribe for more. And I guess, Keith, we'll see you next time.